So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where all four hemispheres of the world go to war with each other. Now, of course, there is the northern and southern hemisphere and the eastern and western hemisphere, but what if we divided it into four quarters and all four of those quarters went to war? That's what we're going to be taking a look at today. So if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers. And let's go ahead and jump straight into the scenario. Alright, so like I said, all hemispheres in the world will be divided into four different quarters. We have the northwestern, the northeastern, the southwestern, and the southeastern. Now you might be wondering, what happens to countries like France, for example, who are in multiple hemispheres? Well, that's quite simple. We just give the majority over to whichever hemisphere. So a majority of France is actually in the eastern hemisphere, which means we'll be giving all of France to the eastern hemisphere. And I do want to say just real quick, these lines are not perfect. They're pretty close, but that does not mean that they are perfect. Anyway, let's go ahead and create the teams. So team one will of course be the northwestern hemisphere team. These guys have a lot of strong countries within them, such as the United States and Canada. There's also Colombia and Venezuela and Mexico, of course. And like I said, there are some countries that are in multiple hemispheres, but we're going to be giving the majority to whichever hemisphere has more. So Colombia has more in the northern hemisphere than the southern hemisphere, so most of the country will of course go to the north. And what about French Guiana? Well, they're a part of France. They are a French territory, so we will be coloring them the color of France. All right, so here is team one, all completely colored in. They are the red team and the northwestern team. Now we'll go down here to the southwestern hemisphere. This is probably going to be one of our weaker teams, but it still does consist of some strong countries like Brazil and Argentina. But here we go, here is our southwestern team. And now we go over to the old world where we have to finish off the northwestern team because there are still some countries that need to be added to it. Those countries include all of Western Africa over here minus Algeria, Portugal, Spain, and the United Kingdom and Ireland. So here is our fully completed northwestern team. Now we can get over to the eastern hemisphere and do both north and south. But I think there is there's going to be quite a strong team here that we're going to see form that is maybe a little unfair. Yeah, the northeastern team, that's insanely strong. That is like a majority of the world. So let's go ahead and color them in. This team will consist of a lot of these Central African countries. Kenya is almost split down the middle, but I do think they have a little bit more land on the southern side. So we'll draw the line there, but this is our border right here, which means everything north and everything east of this is of course going to be on that team. All right, and here is our completed northeastern team. Yikes, that has Russia, China, India, Germany, France, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. Yeah, that's a lot. And the Koreas in Japan, Egypt, Algeria, Iran. I mean, that's insane. But now for our last hemisphere, we have the southeastern hemisphere, and that is basically just every country that remains that will be colored in yellow. And this is our final team completed. Now we have all four hemispheres ready to go to war. And I do just now realize that, like, if I colored French Guiana in blue, that would probably look really dumb. So let's go ahead and just give French Guiana independence and we'll give them over to the red team. Anyway, goodbye lines and hello fighting. It's time to get to war. So in these big World War videos, I do like to go left to right. So we'll start over here in the Western Hemisphere, more particularly on the border between the North and the South, where red team troops will cross the border into Ecuador and capitulate the country very quickly, then moving on to the coastal areas of Peru. Likewise, however, the green team will then push up into the Guianas, taking out French Guiana, Suriname, and most of the normal Guyana. Now the strategy here is pretty simple. The green team wants to take out the red team in this area, and the red team wants to take out the green team in this area, which means that more than likely the red team over here is going to get abandoned by like the US because, hey, we got to take these guys out first. Also, apologies if I sound stuffy. I am kind of sick right now. Also, a weird thing has been happening with my recordings where the colors are shifted really weird. Like in the last Wixo video, the colors were really weird and I had to edit them to make them look better, but it was still kind of weird. And when I went to record this video, the colors were really shifted and dull, and I was like really confused because I didn't mess with any of my settings. But apparently HDR, which is a setting on computers, really does not work well with OBS. So if you ever have any weird color difficulties when you're recording videos, it's more than likely HDR, not your settings. So just turn HDR off. That's really random, but I just thought I would mention it just in case, because there's not a lot of videos out there that really tell you that. Anyway, now on to the European front. It's not going to look good for these guys. Specifically in Africa, they have no one really except for Morocco in this area. There's Mauritania, but it's still like Morocco's the powerhouse here. And they themselves would have to deal with Algeria. So I'm pretty sure the blue team strategy here would be pretty much just sweep in from Nigeria and take out all these weaker countries in the south, So they just move right along, take out Liberia, Sierra Leone, going into Guinea, and then Guinea-Bissau, up into Gambia and Senegal, and kind of just wrap around up into Mauritania before pushing into Mali and capitulating their government. In Europe, it's basically World War II again, trying to get into the British Isles, but also there is now an active conflict on the border between France and Spain, which is mostly just like pushing into Catalonia and then down the Spanish coast, because the mountain range here would be kind of hard to invade past. Now, in this front of Africa, this is a little bit more interesting because there aren't really too many strong countries in this area. You have Sudan, but they are kind of in a military coup right now. You have Ethiopia, and then the Somalia, which doesn't function. So I would actually give the advantage to the yellow team in the African front in this region. They invade into Equatorial Guinea, into Cameroon, and the Central African Republic before entering into South Sudan and capitulating them almost immediately, because South Sudan is also not very stable. We see the end of Uganda and advances made into Somalia territory, with a little advance going into Ethiopia. Now on to this front line, we have Indonesia versus Malaysia. Yeah, Malaysia does not win that pretty much ever, but it does get a little bit more complicated because of the Philippines as well as the rest of Southeast Asia, which would more than likely send reinforcements down to fight off any Indonesian advances. So this is our world map after the first stage of fighting. There's no real like true winning team right now. I guess the blue team would be considered that, and then the yellow team surprisingly, and then the red team, and then the green team is probably, well, no, I think the red team is actually losing the most right now because they have so much territory that was taken in Africa. So yeah, the red team is losing pretty bad right now, despite having the strongest country in the world within their alliance. But that doesn't mean anything right now. Let's get to the next stage of fighting. And in this stage of fighting, we see a large red counteroffensive in the Guianas, which pushes back Brazil severely. We also see the advancement of the front line in Peru as they continue to snake down the coast and take even more Peruvian cities. There is a slight excursion into the Amazon area, but not much because it's the Amazon. Why would you do that? And what we have here is basically the US sending all of its forces down here to deal with Brazil. Brazil is the main reason why the United States cannot help out in Europe with the UK and Spain. I'm sure they're sending some forces over there, but not enough, and not nearly as much as they're sending down to South America, because Brazil isn't fighting a multi-front war. It's just one front for them, which means they're using their entire combined military, and the United States has to match that. Oh, they also just captured the Galapagos. Not too sure what strategic advantage that has, but why not? Alrighty, back over here in Africa, it is much of the same, with the blue team just completing their sweep of the area. They don't go too hard though because of the advancing yellow forces down south, but they do near the border of Morocco after taking all of Western Sahara. And now the final stand for the red team in Africa begins as blue team troops enter into Morocco. Like I said though, they are diverting some attention down here to the yellow front line, which is continuing to advance north, now entering in the Chad and most of Sudan. They're able to sneak up the coast of Somalia and capitulate the country before doing a complete surrounder of Ethiopia. However, due to Ethiopia's crazy terrain, they can't really penetrate into the north of the country. Shortly after that, the blue team does carry out their counteroffensive, which they have been building up, which targets over here in the west. I don't know why I struggle with it. I'm good with left and right. There's no issue there. It's just east and west. It's like for some reason I can't think on the spot of where east and west is. Maybe because the earth is like, you know, a globe, and eventually if you go so far west you end up in the east, right? So that's kind of why it might mess with me. But at the same time, the same thing can be said about north and south, so maybe not. I don't know why I struggle with it. And it really shouldn't be an issue because, you know, when you're looking at a map, it doesn't change, it doesn't spin. West is always west and east is always east. West is always left, east is always right. I get it mixed up either way. But the blue team's counteroffensive now enters in to areas like Gabon and the Congo. These countries are relatively weak, so the counteroffensive goes extremely well as Northern African troops help out the front line. The DRC, however, does prevent any further penetration into southern Africa. So we'll now switch over to the front line over here in Southeast Asia. And in this front, with the combined forces of China and India, it is basically destroyed. Malaysia is liberated very quickly, and very soon we see a combination of all of East Asia work together to take out these Indonesian isles. They take out Sumatra and then move over to Borneo. And little by little, these Southeast Asians and the Oceanics, they basically lose all hope, because once Indonesia collapses, it's pretty much over. Yeah, this is the combined force of China, India, South Korea, and Japan all working together. And you still have help from countries like the Philippines and Pakistan, and maybe even Russia, and all of Southeast Asia. So it's all of them versus like Australia and a few islands in Indonesia. And that is extremely unfair. So the sweeping of this region cannot be understated. Like, it's bad. Like, a landing in Australia is one thing, but then what happens afterwards is the involvement and pushing of 20 million troops probably into this northern tip. And from there, it's just straight, like, sweeping. Like, Australia, with all due respect, you don't stand a chance. The blue team's armies, they are massive. Now, they might not be as advanced as some armies. Like, maybe the red team has slightly better technology because of the United States. But then again, the blue team, I mean, they have China and they have Western Europe. The argument might be able to be made, but at the end of the day, the blue team just has the pure numbers. And eventually, you know, those numbers would produce better technology than the red team could ever hope to have. So really, the blue team is just basically unstoppable. I mean, this is a ridiculous scenario for the blue team. But we will fight it out, and we will see which final two teams do remain. Back over to the front. In South Africa, though, the red team is starting to realize the urgency of the situation. Now, of course, I do want to say real quick, there are like garrisons and stuff, so you do have to administer the captured territory, which does take a little bit of your military to do. But that's really no like issue. Like, you could just take like South Korea alone. Like, hey, take your entire military down to Australia and Indonesia and make sure they don't break away, and that would be fine. That's more than enough. But, you know, you're only taking away South Korea. There's still Japan, China, and India, and Pakistan, which is insane. Like, you're just subtracting South Korea, which is, you know, a top 10 power, but at the same time, you're able to do that because you just have so much more. And I'm not even like talking about like Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, France, and Germany. Like, this team is ridiculous. Anyway, though, they realize the issue of the situation, and the United States basically just says, hey, we're gonna blitz through South America as quickly as possible. And this maneuver is really dumb because it costs them a lot of troops, a lot of manpower, and a lot of resources, but it is fairly effective. It's just that if they went a lot slower, they would have saved those resources and not burnt through them as quickly, and they definitely would have been a lot stronger had they just been slower. But nonetheless, they choose to advance quickly through South America, targeting the weaker countries in the central in order to cut off Brazil from Argentina, which is a very important step in their plan. After they establish all of the naval superiority they need around Brazil, multiple landings are made in some of the more populated areas in hopes of taking this country out as quickly as possible. Back over in Europe, though, the red team is screwed. Yes, Spain versus all of Europe. Let's see how that goes. All right, there goes Portugal too, and eventually Morocco is also lost. And now it's the United Kingdom and Ireland holding out on the European front. Oh yeah, and Iceland. You never forget about Iceland. But at the end of the day, it's not looking too good for the UK. All it takes is a few naval ships from India and China to probably get naval superiority in the channel. And with that comes air superiority, and with that comes a ground invasion, which the UK would just die instantly from. But before we see the probably much alluded to death of the United Kingdom, also much supported by you guys probably, we have to see the death of the African front for the yellow team. Their strongest contributor is like South Africa, and that's about all they have on their team. There's Mozambique and Tanzania. The DRC is fractured. It doesn't function correctly, so you can't really get much military help from them. There's Angola as well and Namibia. But versus those countries that I've been talking about, you know, earlier, yeah, it's just a complete sweep. South Africa will hold out for a little bit, but Madagascar will be captured, and it's not looking good for them. Back over in the Americas, we see the United States consolidate its fronts with the help of their allies in order to do a full encirclement of Brazil. And following the capture of Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, we see their complete surrender. And with that, basically, we have the capturing of Buenos Aires and the subsequent surrendering of Argentina, which leads to the surrendering of Chile. That was pretty quick, but also, I mean, kind of likely. The United States, if they really wanted to, could go down here and do some real damage to both Brazil and Argentina at once. Of course, without the help of their allies in North and South America, that would be a lot more difficult, but since they have this landing ground and staging area right here, the invasion of South America went a lot quicker than it would if it was just the US versus these guys. And there it goes. All right. So the blue team has, So the blue team has complete control over the old world. And yeah, it's blue versus red, which common theme in my videos. But to kind of save you the sweet stuff here, let's just break down how the red team loses this war. All right, Iceland is gone, and soon thereafter, so is Greenland. And now they have a tricky little decision to make. Where do they want to attack first? Do you want to try to invade the North American continent? That would be really hard and really costly. Or do you want to go after South America, which, I mean, it's just, you're fighting like the garrisons, you're fighting all of the military that is trying to control this area. So that would be a lot easier. Plus, the US has to stretch its navy throughout the entire Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. And it's definitely a lot weaker down here than it is up here. So invading this area would be a lot easier. However, it would take a much longer time to move your way all the way up to North America to officially end this war once and for all. So what do we do? why not both? Alright, the blue team makes a landing in Brazil, where the US made a landing just a few months ago, and very quickly they see a lot of success against the garrison armies here, and they capture Buenos Aires and basically liberate all of Argentina before capturing the capital of Brazil, and also doing much of the same as these countries are able to kick out any forces which are occupying them. From here we see the US basically just fully retreat out of all of Latin America, back up to their own border, in hopes of holding out and maybe getting a peace deal. But yeah, with the US gone, South America is gone as well. Meanwhile, a landing is made in Newfoundland, which very quickly turns bad for Canada, as they're unable to stop the advancing forces as they then move into Quebec. We also see troops enter into Maine, and it is here that the American government probably starts crying because they're just outnumbered. There's nothing they can really do. Back down in South America, goodbye to northern South America, and also goodbye to pretty much all of Central America going into Mexico. With the US military now set on defense of the contiguous 48, it is more likely that we would see the complete capturing of all Caribbean nations. We'd also probably see a landing in Alaska made eventually, although the US military would probably do all that they can to hold on to Alaska because of their oil reserves. But once again, the numbers are just simply not in the red team's favor. The Japanese take Hawaii. Wow. I bet they thought they would never be able to do that again. But now the blue team is sneaking up through Mexico. After capturing Mexico City, we see the capitulation of the Mexican country. And with continued invasions happening into Ontario, the capital city of Canada, Ottawa, is captured, which goes ahead and basically makes them useless because all of their population centers at this point have also basically been captured, other than the ones that are here in the west. But after all of Ontario falls, the US is cooked. The world will first start their offensive into New England, taking over states like New Hampshire, Vermont, and northern New York, before they enter into Massachusetts, taking out Rhode Island and Connecticut, and all of upstate New York. From here, an offensive is made into Michigan, capturing the key city of Detroit, and soon thereafter, a spearhead is made into Philadelphia, capturing that major city. The capturing of the city also serves as a huge morale destruction for the United States. Following this event, we have New York being under constant bombardment, as the spearhead now looks to make its way down towards Washington, D.C. At this point, the blue team isn't really too worried about invading the rest of the United States because A, it's really hard to do. The geography of the United States is really tough to invade. And two, why would you need to do that when you can just go ahead and capture the capital of Washington, D.C., to take over the Nova and Maryland regions with tons of population and economy, then take over the rest of Delmarva, capturing New Jersey, thank you very much. And finally, the blue team captures all of Long Island, taking New York and effectively making the United States surrender. Now, of course, realistically, the U.S. probably wouldn't surrender. It would just go into total war. You would get a bunch of rednecks in the mountains with guns shooting at you. Sure, they're not a trained militia, but if you give someone a gun, they're bound to do some damage. With that being said, though, of course, the whole population of the world would eventually wipe out the United States. So goodbye, America, and also goodbye, Canada. And the blue team will pretty easily win this war. It wasn't really fair. I mean, taking a look at the hemispheres again, most of the world's population lies in the northern hemispheres, which is why we saw the destruction of first the yellow team and then the green team happen. And it ended up being a 1v1 between the northeastern and the northwestern hemispheres, of which northwestern hemisphere has the most people in it and probably the strongest amount of militaries in it. So that would very obviously overthrow any hope that this hemisphere had. So yeah, that was it. I thought this video would be a little bit more fair-sided, and then I looked at the hemispheres and I was like, dang, this isn't really fair at all. Nonetheless, though, it was still fun to see how exactly it all happened, and if you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers. Give me any video suggestions you have in the comments. Make sure to join the Discord server if you're interested, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Also, happy 1-year anniversary to the Wixo series. Now, of course, I'm recording this on the 6th, which is the 1-year anniversary. You're seeing this on the 8th. But in case you didn't see the community post, the Civilization series is officially 1 year old, which is insane. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode.